Hello, welcome to Faith and Geekery. I was thinking about that earlier on. That I was at some point going to get that mixed up. Faith and Geekery or Faith and Geekery. My name is Mark. Welcome to my spare room. And tonight we are going to be talking about books and films. And so it's quite a nice setting of having most of our books, most of our Christian books. These are all normal books behind me. And tonight I'm not on my own. I'm going to be joined by Paul. And so I'm just going to bring him onto the screen now. Good evening, Paul.
Good evening. Sadly, I'm not in the room with all of our nice books.
I can see a slither of a bookshelf behind you, but there is a piano and a keyboard behind. Yeah, well, some of us may. How are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks.
Jolly good. I tend to ask people on the stream what sort of geeky things that you've been up to in the last week. So I guess that question can come to you first, Paul. Have you been up to anything geeky? That doesn't have to be necessarily like something just something that in the category that is seen as to be geeky. It could be kind of cover all kinds of things that you get geeky over, if that makes sense. So it could be a whole breadth of things. So one person asked whether running was and things like that. So it's entirely up to the individual. So that's a wide, broad question for you. And folks on the stream, feel free to comment away if you've been up to anything geeky.
So I think my geeky thing at the moment is getting back into black and white analog photography.
Ooh, okay.
I pulled out my old Pentax K1000 and started playing with black and white film.
Pretty cool.
And trying to remember how to develop things.
Oh, I was about to say, yeah, are you doing it yourself or are you sending it away? But that sounds to me... So have you got a darkroom set up?
I found a darkroom in Leeds that you can join as a member for a certain amount of money a year, which I will probably be doing soon.
Cool. So is that what you've been exploring, or is that something that you're yet to explore?
I've been and had a look around and watched whilst one of my films was developed on the basis that I couldn't remember how to unload it into the canister.
Right. Yeah. That is... I mean, I don't think I remembered it first time round, but my dad was into that sort of stuff. And we just had the rusty boxes and containers that had various fluids in, but we never really did it. But I think we had fun double exposing and things like that on the reels and things. That's cool. I think I've been playing around with 3D printers as usual. I think that's my usual category at the moment. But I've been playing around with Tinkercad and actually playing around with 3D kind of modeling and things like that, and Blender and things. So actually, doing kind of creating the digital files to then go to the printer. But there's also the opportunity to create the digital files and use them in a digital terrain as well. So I've been doing a 3D render of a sheep. So that's all fun. But for a Christmas project, or for a Good Shepherd, I guess. So that's that. I feel as if we've actually got nobody at the moment. Maybe everyone's doing Jay's quiz. That is fair enough. This is just a try of doing the 8 o'clock slot on a Thursday to see whether that fits, because it kind of fits in with my diary, and that we can go a bit more regularly. So tonight, what sort of things are you wanting to bring in the book, or is it in the movie category to begin with? What sort of?
All sorts of things I could bring from both. Books is probably the easy one. I'm a bit of an avid reader. And it would be a passion in books that I know that you share. We have more or less everything Terry Pratchett in hardback somewhere downstairs.
Fantastic.
And both myself and Claire really enjoy revisiting them.
Yeah. Well, it's really annoying because I got into Terry Pratchett with Truckers, Wings and Diggers, or Truckers, Diggers and Wings. And I've picked them off the shelf to read them through before I read them to the children. And I've misplaced them somewhere. And I have no idea where I've got them, because I think that was my kind of entryway in for me. And I was going to see whether the kids are into that sort of thing as well. But that, yeah, all things Terry Pratchett is very much my bag, and I think it's my range is up here, and I've only got some hardback books coming up to here, but yes, very much all things Terry Pratchett is very good. Is there anyone that stands out for you in particular of the Terry Pratchett range?
I think at one point I would have gone for some of the earlier books, but now I think I particularly enjoy the later ones with the von Lipwig sagas of going postal and making money, and everything around, well, the clacks, the trains, or raising steam in particular. They all rather tickled my fancy. I suspect that partly I could look at the institutions and technology that is based on in real life and geek out a little bit over that as well.
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of Pratchett. I'm aware though that it seems as if it's kind of his writing has got even better, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And so some of the earlier ones, you kind of go, yeah, I mean, it's still good, still of a very good standard, but you kind of are aware that maybe he's still honing it a bit and still kind of, or finding his groove with his characters. And so his style is fantastic, but it's when you get your teeth into a good character, then it just sings. And yeah, I agree. I really love Moist von Lipwig, Sam Vimes. Interesting kind of some of the way they've been represented on TV and such, because I realised that is it BBC America tried to do like they borrowed inspiration from the kind of like a
From the
multiverse
guards storylines, and I wasn't
yeah,
impressed.
no, it was like trying to do something like fantasy, but as if it's the 80s. And I mean, really good cast, but it was just the material that they'd, well, it's a shame they didn't actually use the proper material. I guess
Yeah.
they kind of brutalized this mock Pratchett, and therefore it was nice. It felt as if it maybe had been written on the back of a beer mat, and they had some great ideas, but the execution of it was appalling, really. No, yeah, it's. I thought the actor who played Vimes was really good, but just the story and the way that they'd represented him in that way, and a lot of the other cast was really good, well cast, and fantastic actors, but it just didn't. Yeah, they should have lent more towards the source material than springboard off it into oblivion.
The
But
characters don't really work outside of the Discworld in some ways.
no, exactly. So, in fact, I'm just aware that people might be tuning in and thinking, "What are they on about?" So let's just talk about. Let's just create a little banner on the go. Add banner. So Discworld at the moment. So yeah, welcome. We're just talking about Discworld and books and films eventually, but starting off with the books. Yeah, I mean, I really love Death as the character, which is a little bit strange, but I kind of just the way that his take on death and the way that it was humorous and the way that you kind of I don't think I really had that anywhere else, kind of reading that sort of stuff. And so that was entertaining, and like the death of rats. So I guess it should. Oh, very good. Oh, yeah, the Reaper Man. Yeah. That was one of my first books that I read. I think it may have been Reaper Man. That was my first Discworld book, other than Truckers, Diggers, and Wings. And so I don't know about you, because I guess you were in America, weren't you, up until a certain age? Because I watched Truckers on CITV, and it was like a plasticine animation version, and that's what really that is what piqued me into kind of and interested me to kind of go, oh, this is a book, is it? And so I think my auntie or uncle got me Wings or Truckers again or something like that, and that was the way in, and I didn't look back from that point on, really. And I think the Reaper Man was oh no, but Reaper Man, soul music, they were definitely, or music with rocks in, and what else is there? But then But yeah, it's a very good series. A very good series.
Yeah.
Have you? Yeah. Is there any other books that jump out at you for Discworld?
Well, Soul Music's definitely one of them. It's also the frustrating one that I cannot find in hardback with the Josh Kirby artwork on it, and I'm very upset about that.
Oh,
Keeping looking, it's probably one of my geeky things trying to get them all into hardback like that. But yeah, the death story has always really entertained me. I suspect it's because he likes cats. Mort was one of the first books that I really read. Although I think I got into them at secondary school and I found them in the school library, and probably did start with The Color of Magic, which is now not the book I would recommend people to start with. It's the
yeah,
sort of the world isn't quite realised at this point,
yeah, yeah.
and I think I've switched around a bit as to which ones I really go back to depending on what I'm up to. So whilst I was studying, I went back to almost anything with the Unseen University in it on the basis that I looked at that and went, yeah, this feels really, really familiar.
Yeah, because I think am I right in thinking that there was the witches that kind of like saga bit, and then kind of moved to like the city guard? Is it the city guard sort of thing? And then is it the wizards, or is it the wizards and the city guards kind of overlap, and then kind of more? Eventually, we get to kind of Sam Vimes kind of thing, and then kind of Moist One's Lit Big. I can't remember like the middle core of things.
Yeah.
I guess you get more of the expanding world of. Oh, you know what I said about truckers and diggers and wings? Turns out I've left them on the shelf. Oh, jolly good. So yeah, so kind of yeah. So I guess you got the. I think you've got the expanding bit. So like Carpajuglium. Oh, I've got two. I've got two copies of that for some bizarre reason. Very interesting.
Well, we made ourselves very popular at one point because when we
Oh, yeah,
merged
when you
our
got together.
collections,
Yeah.
we had several double ones to give away to fellow students.
Yeah.
I think the Witches ones I always liked, just simply for the section right at the beginning of Witches ripped straight out of Macbeth.
Yes, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because actually, at the time, I actually didn't have a clue. It was only kind of once I got older, then revisited the books, going, right, yeah. Because what's the one about the one that rips off? Because then again, this is it. You can read them in a sense and enjoy them, but then knowing that they kind of riff off other kind of books and sources or kind of ideas and ideals. I think it's just hilarious. So which is the Phantom of the Opera? Is that Lords and Ladies? No,
Masquerade, I think.
Masquerade. Oh, is that actually one of the ones I don't actually have? Yeah, that is the only Terry Pratchett book I don't actually have on there. But I've got Carpajuglium twice, so swings and roundabouts. Yeah. So I did find though, like the earlier, I've got Strata and the Dark Side of the Sun, and I found those just a little bit kind of special, not kind of fantastic. But I guess are they technically not Discworld?
No, they're. I mean, I also found that I quite enjoyed the Science of the Discworld books as well.
Yeah.
That was always fun. And at one point, I did get very into the audiobook versions when Tony Robinson was narrating them.
Yes. And that kind of leads me into kind of the not just the books, but the ways in which they've been portrayed. So I remembered, was it Weird Sisters? That was a cartoon first, and then they did. I can't remember what was it. The other next system. Weird Sisters, and then because that's Magrat, isn't it? But then, yeah, they did. Is then when they started to kind of try and kind of make them into things such as, the Colour of Magic and like Fantastic. No, am I making that up? Colour Magic.
Color of Magic and Sorcery, I think it
Yeah.
was run. Color of Magic, Light, Fantastic, and Sorcery all
Yeah.
kind of run together a bit.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first film that Sky did based on it. I wasn't entirely convinced by David Jackson as Rincewind. He didn't fit my mental picture.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, really. And interestingly, how kind of what you just mentioned his name, Tony Robinson, kind of no, not Tony Robinson. Was it David Jason as well?
David Jason, yes.
Yeah, and how they kind of flicked around with their characters a little bit and kind of seeing who fitted into what. And it was very good to have Terry Pratchett, kind of course, having like little glimpses in those. But then, it's just a bit of a shame that they didn't really kind of go much further. But I mean, it would be an epic thing. I mean, it would be epic for someone like Disney or for Amazon to kind of really strive forth with the kind of series of them or things like that. But
because
but no,
I think the Hogfather film was excellent.
The Hogfather, yeah, no, absolutely, that was fantastic, kind of. I'm trying to remember which way around it was because that was Tony Robinson. Was that Tony Robinson as the store manager? And
I think so, yeah.
Giving away the presents. It's like, but he's the Hogfather. Yeah, and I've got that as a on my site. Yeah, I've got that DVD. I've also got Going Postal and what's the other one that Sky made into? Going Postal and the other one. My mind's gone. Going Postal and what was the next one? Making Money, wasn't it? Did they do Making Money as well? I'm going crazy.
I think they might have done, yeah.
Yeah, I think I had both of those. Though now I'm wondering whether I've made it up. But then, it's interesting because I then kind of have the I'm forgetting it now. What's the girl's name? The shepherd.
Tiffany Aiken.
Tiffany Aiken, yes. I quite like that kind of branch off. But then the later stuff that was no longer Discworld, I think that I struggled with that one a bit.
The Long Earth series I found to be a bit weird. They were good books. Although his best collaboration was probably Good Omens.
You see, it's interesting because I couldn't actually get into that originally. I struggled, and it was only with kind of watching the Amazon series that I was like, oh no, actually this is really good. But then I didn't know if it was just kind of Neil Gaiman's kind of approach to stuff that just left a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. But at the same time, I've kind of really liked his my brain at the moment. The other series that he's done, the Thingy Man, Sandman.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed that actually, and I was just like, oh, that's interesting. But I don't know whether he took inspiration or kind of some guidance or something, kind of some creative kind of guys from Terry Pratchett, really, because I thought there was that especially that personification of death and things like that, and on all the kind of gods, small g. I kind of really, I kind of like that, and it's a bit of Michael Sheen and David Tennant, which is really good. So I can't
think
complain.
that came into it. It's probably the one book that I've given away more copies of than any other. Give it to someone. Oh, you should read this, and then suddenly I've got to buy myself a new copy because it's gone.
Well, that's good. That sounds good.
I'm not at the stage anymore of keeping a spare paperback of it around just in case, but no one's getting my hardback copy.
And just before we move on because I think I'm kind of going to move on from Discworld to other books in the series. And folks, if you are watching, if you want to be in touch about kind of what books or films you're into, or some comments about other geekery things, or I'm sure we're happy to go down an avenue or two and have fun that way. But basically, the thing about Discworld, if you need to sell it to somebody who hasn't come across Discworld before, is there anything that kind of jumps out at you about it? That something that kind of really helps you with stuff, or I want to say the beauty of it really, but I guess I don't want to kind of force any words out of you. How would you sell it, or what does it mean to you?
In terms of reading, it's just really easy to pick up any one of the books and jump in. You don't need any background or backstory to it. They're all beautifully self-contained. And the entire world just holds together. Even The Colour of Magic, despite being the first book and not fully realised, the world that he imagined held together within that. And I suspect that's partly because of the amount of research that went into, as he would term it, round world. And the way that the satire was used to often illuminate some really, really important issues, but in a way that is approachable and very entertaining at the same time.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but as as somebody with a Christian faith, that I found that whilst it talked about God's small g, at no point did I feel threatened by it. It felt nice escapism that I could deal with something that the world is on the back of a turtle, and it just deals with do you know what I mean? It's just such a vacation from my life and my kind of my world and my faith and otherwise, that even when it has a dig towards religion or that kind of stuff, I kind of go, yeah, it's funny, and it's nice to have that bit of gap, and I don't feel threatened by what he writes. I feel sometimes challenged and excited and find it hilarious. The only downside I really found, especially kind of coming to it as a teenager, I found that I got told off a lot for writing footnotes, because I didn't realise that was the thing that not everyone did. So I'd be writing and I'd be just adding footnotes here and there, and I'd be getting told off by my teachers going, why are you putting the footnotes in? Stop it. It's just like, well, it's cool, it helps describe things, and it's just like, no. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay.
I don't think I ever picked up that habit, but there was probably more than a few bits in styles of writing that crept in at times. I think I also found that, often when he challenged issues around religion, it tended to be the things that I agreed with. It wasn't challenging faith so much as the human institutions.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it was just something that I could deal with. It was just exciting to read and nice to have something that I wasn't having to think too deeply about. But at the same time, I felt that kind of real reflective moments actually reading some of Terry Pratchett, and like The Thief of Time and The Fifth Elephant. There was and equally now which one was it? There was one where it's the it was interesting. I went on a visit. I went to visit some churches in Albania, and as I was reading one of the books, I can't remember which one it is. It's one of the far off countries in Discworld where it has a double-headed animal on the flag, and I can't remember which one it is. I want to say it's somewhere like Fifth. Is it Fifth Elephant still? It may be.
It might be The Fifth Elephant, or it might be Thud.
About wolves and things, and I'm fairly sure sitting in Albania reading it with a two-headed eagle and wolves in the mountains sort of thing, I was just like, wow, this really spoke to me. And I think this would have been, I missed an opportunity to go to a signing for Terry Pratchett, and I've kicked myself ever since, because that would have been the question I wanted to ask, is if that kind of country had it in linked with Albania, but then of course bless him, Sir Terry kind of passed away, and I really found it hard to read the last of the books because I knew that I wouldn't have had that excitement again. and it was the main series that got me into reading.
Yeah.
And I'm being honest there that I could. There's books that I delved into, but this was a proper series that I kind of felt really invested in,
Yeah.
and it was a real page turner. And I remember kind of reading through a book in the evening, and in the night and into the early hours, and just until I needed to finish it because I just needed to kind of really kind of get into it. But again, it was something fun and it was something creative, and it was just enjoyable, and it was
Yeah.
it was good. It was good.
And you can reread it and get something that you missed, however many times you've read it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to draw us to an end about about Discworld. Is there anything else to say about Discworld before we close the book on that? That was a pun. Is there anything? Is there any films that you want to talk about or anything like that?
So we're not going to go for the Hogfather then.
Well, it could happen very easily.
If I was to go on a completely different track with films, it would probably be into science fiction, and the one that you almost can't not talk about would be The Matrix.
Oh, okay, cool.
Although it's one of my favourite films.
Yeah,
But partly a few years ago when I was helping to write a module on living with technology, I was told that I couldn't assume that 18-year-olds had watched The Matrix. My first question was, could we make it compulsory for the module?
That's quite scary, isn't it? You can't expect. Now, what is it? City. I really liked Matrix. I think they kind of went a bit crazy with Matrix 2 and 3.
Very much so, yes.
And I haven't even bothered with Matrix 4, the return of Neo or whatever it was. But what was it called? There is a film that came out the same year as The Matrix, and I've forgotten it. Dark City. If you've ever come across Dark City,
I haven't, no.
It is a really obscure one, and I got it on DVD, and it was kind of, I think it was like a European copy at the time where kind of DVDs were hard to get. But Dark City was really kind of enjoyable. Oops, I was just trying to put our little reminder to like and follow and subscribe, folks, if you're interested. And the Dark City is all about somebody kind of coming around in the bath and realizing that he's been framed, and it's a really interesting kind of world twisting, and it is I think it's very similar to The Matrix as it plays around with reality and what we know, but basically the premise is, and I hope no spoilers, and I won't give too much away, but basically is that the whole world is being recreated every night, and people are being reprogrammed, and it pushes that kind of idea, which again is very similar to The Matrix, and so it's, I think kind of The Matrix definitely kind of I think the Dark City is a bit bleak and a bit darker, as in to say the tones, but also the saturation. It is actually quite sometimes hard to watch because it's like murky back streets and kind of puddles and kind of almost like a detective, kind of like a 50s detective style, and he goes and talks to various people, including a prostitute at one point. It's really kind of murky and kind of dingy sort of stuff.
I'm just looking at a review that describes it as Noir Matrix meets George Orwell.
Yeah. That's fair enough. That is quite good. So So I kind of, whilst Matrix got all the popularity, I kind of go, but actually I think Dark City did it better. But I think there's maybe a bit of swearing and a bit of nudity. But I think I think it was a real contender at least. So if you like The Matrix, I would definitely give Dark City a go as well. But is there anything in particular about The Matrix other than Keanu Reeves doing kind of bullet time?
Well, that was always fun. I think it was just a really enjoyable film to watch. And having something sort of set in a familiar world, but in which you can completely suspend your disbelief. the only other film that I would probably put in the same category in that sense is probably Inception.
Oh yeah. I've just done the banner for Matrix now. I'll just have to do one for Inception. Yeah, no, I quite liked Inception. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to kind of present about kind of Inception, or just kind of that you liked about it?
I think in both cases, I like the idea of the sort of twisting of reality in the way that both films do it. And particularly in Inception, the cinematography is just really beautiful at times.
I was about to ask a question about the spinning top at the end, but I guess that will give too much away, so I won't ask that question.
I'm hoping at this point most people have seen it, but
yeah, just in case we won't mention it. But yeah, no, and again, both of those things, and both of those films really do kind of push that sense of reality and kind of explore those sort of themes, don't they? Really, and kind of what is real, and then kind of being able to play to kind of, what if reality, ask that question of, is what if reality is malleable, if you can kind of change the kind of reality around you, how would you do it, and to what lengths can you kind of be able to be be able to change that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's quite fascinating. I quite like, and I think, now is it a similar thing or not? I'm not sure. I quite like Ready Player One for that kind of diving into the, and again, it's that kind of person who isn't kind of wealthy, rich, going on an adventure and kind of finding themselves in, well, technology in Ready Player One's case. Have you read the book or watched the film?
I've dived into the book a bit, but not the film yet.
So I knew that the film was coming out, so I quickly picked up the book, read the book, and occasionally had to Google things because the amount of geekery that is in that about references to kind of 80s and Japanese kind of niche kind of geekdom was really difficult. I was like, I have no idea what this character is. I had to Google it, but that was really fun. And actually, I think they did it. I think the film did it real justice. They cut some corners because I think they just had to for timing. But I have got Ready Player 2 on my pile to read, but I just haven't got around to reading it yet. But I love that for that kind of exploring a universe where technology is kind of it. That is kind of, but yet kind of our humanity is broken and people are going hungry and struggling, but it's all about the tech. And so I find that quite fascinating. But again, another way of delving into a world where you can kind of, they can put on a haptic suit and a rig and dive into a world where imagination is your freedom, and you can kind of do and explore and things. And I guess that's where I kind of maybe put it in the same league as Inception and Matrix, to kind of those romps and adventures where you can kind of immerse yourself, and I guess that ticks the box of all three, doesn't it? So yeah, what else is there? I think for me, a recent film that I've seen, I think on Netflix, is We Have a Ghost, which is really weird, but it's quite fun. And it's the guy from Stranger Things. I'm gonna have to get my phone out for this. What's his face? Who married Katie Allen? Lily Allen. Ghost. David Harbour. That's the one. Oh, hello. Oh, that's interesting. My mouse is actually given up. That could be fun. That's going to be really joyous because I don't know how to control anything now. Anyway, We Have a Ghost, David Harbour. That was really funny. Basically, a family move into a house, and it's a mute ghost. It doesn't say anything. It can't remember, and it tries to scare them, and they're not that bothered. or the kid's not that bothered, and in the end, the kind of disgruntled kid speaks to the ghost and tries to actually help the ghost. And so it's a bit like Casper in some respects, but the world doesn't understand it, and it kind of pushes this idea of the afterlife, or kind of shock, and really exploring, well, what happens if you don't have a good end to your life, and if it's been traumatic, and therefore you don't have the opportunity to kind of go on. And therefore, it's that kind of mystery of trying to work out what happened to this guy in order for him to, it's a little bit sad and tragic, but it's also very fun because you get to see David Harbour with a comb over, flying through walls and trying to scare people and affect the world that he's in, because he can have some kind of poltergeisty kind of powers. But again, it's a nice film. It's a nice film, and it kind of explores the themes of love and loss and trauma a little bit, but then also kind of has a bit of a niggle about kind of what happens next, and living a good life and the opportunity to resolve issues and things like that. Can I be really cheeky and just go and get a wire for my mouse? I'm hoping that I actually had one around, or I usually have one around, but I can't find it, so I'm going to have to go into a neighbouring room. Is that all right? If you'd like to, if you can ask people what they're into, or otherwise, there's a couple of people on. Apologies, folks. I just need to go and get a wire for my mouse. Back in a sec.
So we seem to have a bit of a thing of books and films that come together. And are there any films that have been written or created from books that you've really enjoyed, that you've thought that they've done a really good job of telling that story? I've often found that I get a bit disappointed by a film based on a book because it doesn't come out as I'd have imagined it. But is there anything, or are there any films or TV series even that, based on a book, you think have worked really well?
Hello, I am now back.
So I was just asking people if they've come across any books, films, and TV series where they've based the film or TV series on the book, and how well have they done it? Because I'd say I often find it slightly disappointing. I like to think my imagination's pretty good for that, but there have been some. I think we mentioned earlier on Good Omens. It's one of those TV series that I think they did really, really well. And if we were to go on to another sort of book and film set that I liked, but at the same time was disappointed by, it would probably be The Lord of the Rings.
Oh.
I love the films. They're brilliant, but they're not as I've always imagined it when I've read the books, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think I didn't, if I'm honest, I didn't actually enjoy the first films. And I tried reading The Lord of the Rings, but I found that I could appreciate it for being of its time and introducing the adventure genre and being kind of really in-depth kind of books. But I found kind of just the descriptions of introducing kind of the world and the it was just like, wow, this is like several pages now. And so I think it wasn't fast paced enough for me, and I guess maybe like the first introduction of kind of like a trilogy, but like an ever expanding story where it isn't all resolved in 90 minutes. That says more about me and where I was as a kid, where I was as a young man. That I was just a bit like, I wanted a bit more kind of quicker paced. Give it to me now, and so that was a bit of a shame, really. But
I think I read them when I was about 10 or 11, so had got well into the books at quite an early age, and had listened to the BBC radio series as well.
Oh yeah, well, as I said, it was
really, really good.
There was the animation I think. Which was it only halfway through or something? I can't remember.
Yeah, I never really got into that. I tried it a few times.
Yeah. That being said, I did. Becky really likes the films, and so I have watched them a few times through, and for some bizarre reason, I want to say it's like ITV2 that tends to have them, in that kind of thing. But then I like the Power of the Rings or whatever it is, the Amazon series where they've kind of done the earlier bits. That being said, Becky kind of watches it and goes, "Oh," and I kind of go, "So what? So what's that?" And she's like, "Well, can't you remember this bit off there?" And I kind of go, "No, not really." So, well, that's so and so. What the reference? I'm like, "Oh, right, okay, yeah, I haven't got a clue."
So that would be the one that I don't actually enjoy that much. I think we got about 5 episodes in, and it was sort of no.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was the story or the characterizations that just didn't sit right.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you've ever tried reading the Silmarillion, it could do with a bit of pace at times. So
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it felt kind of quite quaint in some respects, and kind of the slowly cranking up to stuff. And it takes, I can't remember if it's 10 episodes or 12 episodes, but it does take a long time to kind of gradually crank all the way up to some reveal. But then again, you're just like, all right, so that's not resolved then. Like, but I don't know. Do you feel that it's helpful or harmful to have the way that you kind of, instead of a movie or a saga of movies, that you kind of can, I guess, I was about to say to just saturate yourself in more of a lengthy series, because we're going into this kind of big, grand, very expensive kind of big budget kind of series now across the streaming services. Are you happy with those sort of things, or does it depend on the material?
I think it depends on the material. For me, the ones that have worked best have got a really good overarching story for this series, but each episode is to a certain extent self-contained and doesn't leave you with the sort of cliffhanger type endings that you get every single time with the Rings of Power and other similar series.
Yeah,
it's probably easier when you're writing something that's written to be that type of TV series rather than when you're adapting a book.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you very rarely get to the end of an episode and be at the natural end of a chapter.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's true. That's true. And I think just to kind of skirt back around to kind of Going Postal and Hogfather, things like that, what I really like in that is the fact that they are like, I think it's about 4 hours or something, that they're in two kind of 2 hour slots. And that's really nice because they kind of, they go for as long as they need to, rather than, I think it would have been such a shame if they did just throw themselves into like an hour and a half. You'd miss out quite a bit more depth. Whereas the series of things, I'm really into The Mandalorian at the moment. Series 3 is slowly revealing. But again, I think that's quite sweet. But again, the difficulty with Disney is that they do each episode for the length that it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I sometimes struggle with that I kind of go, oh, yeah, this is the next episode. And I'm like, this is only 20 minutes, or 27 minutes or something like that. I'm just like, whereas last week was 40, and it just feels a bit weird and a bit kind of out of kilter. And I find that it's a bit harder to get into. And I realise that they're just, they do it. And that's the other side of it. Do you know what I mean? That whilst they are forcing themselves to always fulfill a 37-minute or 30-minute or 25-minute thing, they just kind of push it for as long as it needs to go, which is a strength, but also about expectation. I think that's also could be a bit of a weakness.
It probably helps that they're not confined to a TV schedule anymore.
Yeah.
And it may be a generational thing. We're both old enough to be used to the sort of 30, 40-minute TV slot. And an episode has to fit into that time.
Yeah.
Whereas there are quite a few people sort of coming up to their 20s, mid-20s, who've only ever really known on-demand TV.
Wow, that would be quite crazy, really, isn't it? But also, yeah, I guess so. I guess I do feel sorry for those things that if they ever need to sell them to the BBC or ITV and things like this, where they're going to go. So what? Each episode is different. I think they would have a little mini meltdown. I don't know what they would do. They'd be like, right, we're going to throw in an episode of Bluey. It's just like to pack out like half, their schedule. But maybe it's because they know they'll never, just mess them up. They won't want it. But yeah, quite fascinating. I was just trying to work through the other films and bits and pieces I've seen recently. Yeah, they made our way through a lot of the series stuff. And do we approach Marvel and things like that? I think that's.
I don't see why we shouldn't. The Marvel films, I've really enjoyed some of them. I didn't think I would originally.
Yeah,
I've never been much of a comic book type person, but I've really quite enjoyed the films.
Yeah. I think it depends on some of them, because I think some of them they kind of gone a bit too far and push it a bit too far away. But then there are some where you just get the right level of stuff, and I still remember kind of Iron Man for the first time. And I know technically there was the Incredible Hulk before that and otherwise, but for me, the way that they sat down and kind of worked with Iron Man. And just decided to go with the, I am Iron Man. Sorry, spoiler, folks. That it just kind of broke the mold a bit. But I think there is a bit of a danger where they then become formulaic for being Marvel films, and therefore, even if they were breaking the mold initially, it feels as if they've got to then do things a bit different. And I think sometimes when they try to do things a bit different, so Doctor Strange into the multiverse, I thought it was a bit, I don't know if that was Sam Raimi being the director again, who didn't touch stuff until since Spider-Man 2 or 3, which I don't care about a spoiler. Spider-Man 3 was the most appalling film I've ever seen. I know people don't agree with me on that on Instagram and places like that, but that was the only time I've walked out of a film. We still sat through and watched all of it. I walked out of the film, and with complete strangers, we were having a conversation about what a waste of money it was, and what was that, what we've just seen, and everybody had this mutual appreciation, a mutual dislike of how awful the film was. And I'd never come across that, and have never since had kind of such a shared experience of just upset, of being upset by a film, of kind of going, wow, that was bad, that was so bad. And so I wanted to kind of give kind of Raimi like another go with multiverse, and I was like, you know what, maybe he's the weakest bit in that, because it didn't go very well.
It's one of the ones, Doctor Strange, I always find that for me the best character is always the cloak.
Yeah.
It almost seems to have more personality than some of the human actors. I don't know why that is, it's just really entertaining.
Yeah, it definitely has that kind of like the magic carpet from Aladdin sort of feel. And very much a bit like We Have a Ghost with David Harbour not kind of having a talking role. It's the way that you can express yourself without any lines. But I think the Marvel kind of has got a lot right. Bizarrely, kind of Thor Ragnarok was one of these films where I sat down and afterwards I thought, do I like this? And it was one of the films again where I watched it the next day and kind of went, yeah, I do. Actually, this is really good. It's different, and I like it for it being different. But genuinely, I was perplexed, thinking, this is a different theme. It's like a different flavour. And I was just like, I don't know if I like that flavour. And then as soon as I went back to it, I was like, no, actually, you know what? They've done this really well, and I do like this flavour of it. and getting Jeff Goldblum into it as well really was just in any film. I think he's fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's very good.
I mean, I'm kind of tempted to say that some of the Thor films and probably Guardians of the Galaxy, I might describe as dad films.
Yeah,
The humour
yeah,
in them is certainly sort of dad joke type humour.
yeah. Well, I think again, part of this kind of the very kind of Marvel flavour sort of stuff of don't take yourself too seriously, or as soon as you get to a serious bit, avoid, steer out of it and throw a dad joke in there. Definitely felt as if that became part of the formula, and
Yeah.
I think again they've just got to watch themselves. I think because they can really kind of fall into a bit of a rabbit hole of just being the same vehicle but just with a different character at the wheel, and I think that is a bit of a concern. But but at the same time, I really enjoyed kind of Guardians of the Galaxy 2 with little baby Groot dancing away and that kind of stuff, and just kind of progressing through. So
Teenage Groot is very Kevin.
yes. And again, so you get that in Love and Thunder, don't you? Thor, Love and Thunder, and I do quite, and I love the fact that you can just kind of interweave, and bless him, Stan Lee having that kind of little kind of nod to him throughout all of them. But again, we should mention Black Panther, and the way that they kind of paid homage to the chap's name. Bring up my phone out again. I want to say character names, and that is not helping in any way, shape, or form. Boseman, Chadwick. Is it Chadwick Boseman?
I think so, yeah.
Oh yeah, and I've just tried doing Black Panther Wakanda Forever, but obviously he's not in that. Chadwick Boseman, yeah, I was right. Just, and it's really kind of amazing to have seen kind of the respect and the love for that, for his life and shining through. And have you seen the Wakanda Forever?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just thought, actually, you know what, even in a big kind of blockbuster movie, they've done that in a really respectful way and dealt with death in a good way, and I think not that I think they were trying to do that for the market or otherwise. I think they were genuinely trying to pay respect to Chadwick Boseman through the character and through the story, and I hope it wasn't about figures and money making. I'm hoping it was about genuine kind of recognizing that the franchise could have, they could have, I would have said badly, replaced the character with another actor, but I think in the way that they just decided to run with that and kind of go, you know what, let's do this properly. I thought they did that really well, again, kind of coming full circle about kind of faith and stuff, just kind of helping to confront death and the way that the various themes of how we deal with death in our life. I thought was really important and really kind of good for them, and I think it wasn't the cup, the chalice that they've been given. I don't think they would have chosen it, but because they did it really well, and I think that is kind of credit to them, and they haven't kind of gone over the top in other directions with it. I thought that was really good, definitely like a good film to ponder over and to reflect on. But the other element of the film that I wasn't too bothered about, but that side of the film I was really kind of compelled, and it felt the right thing to watch and do really.
It's a very different approach to the Disney approach with Star Wars, where it's sort of, a key cast member has died, we're going to use CGI to put them into the film.
and even it's amazing, the anti-aging software and all that kind of stuff is fantastic, but they still can't. There is still something about a CGI person that they haven't quite grasped,
Yeah,
and it's
well,
almost I don't know if it's something about the eyes for me, and
Mm.
it just they don't have there's something about the character behind the eyes that they don't quite get
yeah.
right. It just
I
seems
think
either
we've talked about it in relation to gaming with the Uncanny Valley in the past, and there's
yeah,
something that's not quite human
yeah,
that doesn't connect with you.
yeah, yeah,
And I think it's one of the threads that brings a lot of the films and books that we've talked about together is that there is an element of relationship in them, and that's often the really strong part of the storylines.
yeah,
Um, and actually, you can't have that with AI in the
no,
same way.
yeah, yeah, and that's very interesting about brings us into the kind of cultural relevant chatbot stuff, isn't it? And the AI, and I wonder if we'll be getting films that have been created by AI at any point. I think they've got a long way to go still, but yeah, but I feel for a lot of artists where
Mm.
they're obviously these kind of artificial intelligence are definitely kind of leaning into kind of a bank, a library, the experiences of artists and kind
Yeah.
of creators, and those creators aren't getting any kind of royalties for that, but they're kind of in the best way, or the murkiest and the cloudiest way, kind of plagiarizing in a digital sort of intellectual, sort of sense of how they're kind of yeah
Mm.
diving into that sort of bank
Yeah.
of human creativity and getting away with it because they're doing it in such a vast harvesting sort of way that you can't possibly do it. Anyway, I feel as if we're going down another murky subject, which is away from books and films. But
Although it's almost certainly the topic of several.
yeah, no, and indeed, and I think I'm aware that we're coming up to an hour, and I'm going to try and keep to an hour from this point on. Yeah, I feel kind of films and books definitely can be help us with our imagination, with our escapism, but it also can hold that mirror up to the world that we live in and some of that reality, including the kind of the AI stuff. Any last thing to say, Paul, before we close up? Anything else to share or otherwise?
I don't really think so. I think it's just be really great to find out what other people have been reading and watching and hear some of their thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Just to follow that up on Discord or in the comments.
Yes, yes. I think I did put into the shared thing that there is opportunity to follow us on WhatsApp and Discord. The information is down there, and that's myself with my phone. So it's usually during work hours or kind of when I'm awake hours, and also you could kind of comment. Well, we're coming to an end of this episode, but feel free to kind of come in. We are just exploring kind of different times and otherwise, and so that's maybe why we have fewer people this week. But I think people tend to catch up with us in the week, which again is why we're open to kind of throwing up in the WhatsApp and Discord community. It is the hour, so I'm going to kind of call us to an end. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for the Tom Kirby artwork. Is it Tom Kirby? Yeah. Josh Kirby, that's it. I follow him on Twitter. He's still kind of active and he's fantastic. So yes, thank you. I'm going to withdraw you from the screen. And yeah, bless you folks. Thank you for watching and thank you for catching up with us in the week. Please be in touch. Hoping maybe to kind of go for Thursdays at 8 p.m. And for about an hour, and so kind of keep a bit more to that and explore certain themes, broad themes and otherwise, a bit more broader rather than too narrowed down. So be in touch if you've got any ideas about that, and again, be in touch on Discord and WhatsApp for kind of conversations ongoing throughout. And you may occasionally see some photographs of my 3D printing and otherwise. But to end with, bless you, thank you for joining. And I guess it's for me just to say, blessed are the geeks. Thank you. Goodbye.